can't complain about it. I gotta keep my balance and just keep dancing on it. We getting funky on the scene and you know about it. Like a star on the screen, watch me tip all on it. Now baby, whether I'm high or low, baby, whether you're high or low, you got to tip on the tightrope. Yeah, tip on the tightrope. Baby, baby, whether you're high or low, baby, whether you're high or low, tip on the tightrope. Baby, let me see your tightrope. And I'm still tipping on it. I tip on alligators and little rattlesnakers, but I'm another flavor, something like a Terminator. Ain't no equivocating. I fight for what I believe. Why you talking about it? Just talking about it. Some calling me a sinner, some calling me a winner. I'm calling you to dinner, and you know exactly what I mean. Yeah, I'm talking about you. You can rock or you can leave. Watch me tip without you. No, no, no. Whether I'm high or low, whether I'm high or low, I gotta tip on the tightrope. Baby, baby, whether I'm high or low, I got to tip on the tightrope. Now, baby, tip on the tightrope. You can't get too high. I said you can't get too low. 'Cause you get too high. No, you surely be low. 1, 2, 3, now. Yeah. Yeah. Now shut up. Yeah. Yeah. Now put some voodoo on it. Ladies and gentlemen, the funkiest horn section in Metropolis. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh! We call that classy brass. I gotta keep my
Good afternoon, Perry, Iowa. That's more like it. I said, good afternoon, Perry, Iowa. That's right. So my name is Michael Vasullo. I am Bernie Sanders' Iowa statewide field director. And I've got one question for you, Perry. Are you ready to win? Are you ready to win, Perry? That's great. So a little bit about me. My name is Michael, like I said. I started off getting involved in this movement by organizing on my college campus alongside food service workers that were fighting for a fair contract, that were fighting for health care, that were fighting for higher wages, a $15 minimum wage, but most importantly, they were fighting for dignity and respect. And what it showed me is that when we come together, when students, when farmers, when professors, faculty, food service workers, and service workers, when we come together, we can win. And so after 2 months of organizing on campus alongside those food service workers, with professors, with folks from the neighborhood, with those food service workers and other workers on campus, we won. Those workers won a $6 million contract, and it has taught me that the power, that folks might think that the power lies in the hands of the 1% or the billionaire class, but the power lies in our hands, and that when we come together, we can win. So, look, we've got 275 days to go until the caucus. It's on February 3rd, if you didn't know. You're going to want to mark that date in your calendars. And what's going on all across the state and all across this country, specifically here in Iowa, is that hundreds of thousands of people are coming together to support us. And not just support us, but to fight for Medicare for all, to fight for union rights, to fight for a system that works for all of us, that's not just owned by the billionaire class and the 1%. And so we're winning. In Iowa in 2016, we came in a virtual tie, and that didn't happen because it just was magic. It happened because of people like you in this room. It happened because of people like you and Perry. It happened because of people in Ames. It happened because of people in Malcolm. It happened because of people in Iowa City, in Fort Dodge, in Osage, right? It happened because people came together, right? And so we know it's not going to happen overnight, that there are people rooted against us, that there are people that don't want us to succeed, but we know that our issues, that our fight is the right one. And so we have a choice. We can sit back and we can hope that things get better, right? Or we can come together right now to fight for issues like Medicare for all, free college tuition, union rights, LGBTQ rights, human rights, and a system that works for all of us. I don't know about you, but I want to fight for that system, right? Who's with me? And so our plan is simple. And the first step is committing to caucus, right? We know that we have a unique system here in Iowa, and that in order for us to win, that means we've got to get hundreds of thousands of people. We ourselves have to be in the room on February 3rd, right? The gymnasium, the classroom, the school, you name it, the community center. But not just that. We have to bring others with us. And so all across the state, we're going to be hosting what's called a barnstorm. They're a mass meeting, a mass organizing meeting. Barnstorm is just a nice little phrase, but really what it is, it's a mass meeting of folks just like you, some who have never been involved in this process before, some who have, that are coming together to get involved and to get trained on what to do to bring others into this movement. And then our last step is very simple. We can't just show up ourselves. We can't just get trained ourselves to bring others. We have to actually bring others, right? And so what we're doing is we're knocking doors, we're making phone calls, we're passing out lit, we're canvassing at farmers markets, and we need your help to do so. So if you're with me in doing that, I'd ask that you find a volunteer with a tablet and sign up to volunteer. It's the easiest way to get involved, and it's the most crucial, and it's the most important. Because when we fight, we win. Say it with me. When we fight, we win. 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 That's right. So I have the pleasure of introducing a great group of speakers here today with the senator coming to speak to you all. But first I want to introduce one of the founders of the Women, Food, and Ag Network, Danielle Wirth. Give it up for Danielle.
Thank you. I live in Boone County, and I can't drink my well water. This is really hard to say. My taxes have been subsidizing a system that poisons my water, and your water too. I live under oaks by a hill prairie full of native bees and blooms. The soil stays put on our land because it's protected by deeply rooted prairie. Clear water flows in my creek. Last year, some oaks died. Some organic grapes were poisoned. The suspect was dicamba, an old but newly resurrected herbicide. GMO beans can now tolerate dicamba. The clever scientists from Monsanto declared chemical warfare on plants, and by extension, we of rural Iowa. People, bobcats, kids climbing trees and nesting robins, all of us are targets. All of us are harmed, and a few guys make lots of money. It's all legal but immoral. In the past, bad behavior was regulated if harm was the outcome. The new Iowa ethos is to applaud and protect the money changers, not citizens. There's a meandering creek where my son built rock dams with friends to make ponds that held frogs and turtles. Hard work for barefooted boys. Follow the creek to the Des Moines River, swim with the dogs, great fun. But today the dogs can't drink the river water because it'll fry their liver. Children can't go barefooted in the creeks. Closed to swimming because of fecal contamination, roar the signs at our state park beaches. Fouled with sewage from huge hog factories. History. The seeds of this oppression were sown in the 1980s because Terry Branstad sold us up the river. Industrial agribusiness, Farm Bureau, Monsanto, not independent family farmers, rule now. Agribusiness externalizes the costs of pollution, of air, soil, water, but profits are privatized for the few. Schools are underfunded, legislators are bought and paid for handmaids of wealthy men, and we cannot drink our water. The river otters, dragonflies, and bass didn't poison the river. Reynolds Republicans sealed the deal with Big Ag, continuing the abuse of land and people. I want our beautiful land returned by those thieves from corporate agribusiness. I want justice and protection for we the people. And the other community members who live here too. Turtles, birds, prairie falcons. I want this to be a place that my adult son will want to return to someday, but apparently not today. And that's why I'm for Senator Bernie Sanders. And now it's my pleasure to welcome Ben Scher, campaign co-chair and founder of Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream, who I'm personally holding responsible for the 2 or 3 extra pounds I'm carrying around because of American Cone Ice Cream. Profits go to charity.
Thanks. Well, all I can say is that the 2 or 3 extra pounds looks pretty good on her. You know, before Bernie, I used to be the most famous guy from Vermont. So it's nice to hand over that mantle to Bernie Sanders because, you know, ice cream is good, but a president of the United States that truly believes in justice in all its flavors, that is euphoric. So, you know, euphoria is a high-minded word, but the reason that Bernie is going to be able to transform Washington is that he's down to earth. He has a vision, and it's pretty basic. What would our country be like if it worked for the benefit of regular, everyday people instead of huge corporations and the ultra-wealthy? You know, he knows what he's up against. He has no delusions. He has been in the cesspool of what is politics in Washington today. And it's that experience that will enable him to finally flush the crap down the drain. You know, I don't see Bernie as a politician in the usual sense of the word. In fact, you know, I've never really been a supporter of any other political candidate except for Bernie. And it's because Bernie is a fighter for justice, economic, social, and racial. And he uses politics as a means to that end. You know, before Bernie, I never had a mayor that represented my values, or a congressman, or a senator. And I just can't tell you how good it feels to actually have a political representative that represents me. So I just want to give you a taste of what's gotten me so excited about seeing this guy in the White House. For the last 40 years, I've been Bernie's constituent. I've seen how steadfast and determined he is. For these last 4 decades, he's worked constantly to improve the quality of life for regular everyday people and those who are oppressed. You know, back in 1980, when Ben & Jerry's was first starting out in an old converted gas station, Bernie won an improbable victory over a long-term incumbent Democratic Party machine, old crony politician, and he won the election for mayor by 10 votes and became my mayor. His first act was to shut down plans to privatize Lake Champlain, the shore of Lake Champlain, by building high-end condominiums there. And he fought that, he fought it successfully, and he's now turned that land into a public park open for everybody. When he became my congressman, one of his first acts then was to personally take busloads of senior citizens over the border into Canada so that they could buy their prescription drugs at decent prices. When he was in the House, he co-founded the Progressive Caucus, which has now become the biggest values-based caucus in the House of Representatives. He voted against NAFTA before being against NAFTA was cool. He voted against going to war in Iraq twice. Then, in 2007, he defeated the richest man in Vermont and became my senator. As senator, he worked with conservatives to force the first ever audit of the Federal Reserve, which revealed $16 trillion in ultra-low interest loans after the financial crash in 2008 and numerous conflicts of interest. Then he led a successful effort to stop the so-called chained CPI, which was going to lower benefit payments to people who get by on Social Security and veterans benefits. And just last September, Bernie introduced the Stop Bezos Act. That stands for Stop Bad Employers by Zeroing Out Subsidies. And the idea, what that act does is it is for corporations, large corporations that are paying lousy wages and whose employees therefore have to get by on food stamps and Medicaid. It tells those corporations that they need to reimburse the federal government for those benefits that their employees are getting. And just a month after introducing the act, Jeff Bezos, head of Amazon, raised their minimum wage to $15 an hour. And just today, in the news that you've read over the last month and continuing, in this ultra-divided, highly partisan political environment, it was Bernie who was able to bring together Republicans and Democrats to pass a resolution against the war in Yemen, calling for the U.S. to get out of that war. You know, when Bernie ran for president the first time, and he said he wouldn't take any big money, I thought it was a mistake. I thought that he'd never raise enough money to mount a credible campaign. And then I came to understand it. Bernie understands that in order to accomplish anything, once he gets elected, he needs a huge army of supporters. And if he wasn't able to get a huge army of supporters to donate a small amount of money, He didn't want to become president because then he wouldn't be able to accomplish anything once in office. So, what do I think about Bernie, the man? Well, he's always been the same, constant. He never wavers. He's been focused on justice. He's been focused on making an America that works for working people. And he has a clear vision for how to make America kind again. And he's continually coming up with innovative ways to do it. So he's not a fancy guy. He's pretty down home, no airs. And I like his hairstyle. That never changes either. He doesn't go with the trends. He sets the trends. Small donor-funded campaigns, universal health care, publicly funded colleges and universities. Bernie, the trendsetter? Who knew? But just look at all the other candidates that are following him. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you the next President of the United States, Bernie Sanders.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for being out on a beautiful, sunny Saturday afternoon. Much appreciated. Let me thank Michael Fasullo for his field pitch, getting you all involved, Danielle Wirth for her remarks, and Ben Cohen. Let me say a word about Ben. You all know about Ben and Jerry's, right? But what you may not know, and back in Vermont they are heroes, but you may not know that Ben and Jerry not only produced a really tasty product, might I say, but also pioneered in the idea that you can run a profitable corporation and be a good citizen as well. So these are guys who very consciously did everything they could to protect Vermont dairy farmers, treated their workers with respect, and helped lead our state in terms of environmental protection. So we appreciate all that they did. Before I get to the thrust of my remarks, I just want to make a couple of points. Number one, it was an interesting week in D.C. A couple of months ago, I and a conservative Republican named Mike Lee worked together to end U.S. intervention in the Saudi-led war in Yemen. And we were successful. We had all Democrats voting for the resolution. We had 7 Republicans voting as well. And why this was important, and the House did the same. And why this was important is this was the first time in 45 years since the War Powers Act was established that Congress voted to end U.S. intervention in an unauthorized and unconstitutional war. That's a big deal. For too long, Congress has abdicated its constitutional responsibility. All of you guys know what's in the Constitution, and that is, it is the Congress which determines whether this country goes to war, not a president, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. And for too many years, Congress abdicated that responsibility. On Thursday, we were unable to vote to overturn Trump's veto. But the good news is, I think you're going to see Congress claw back its constitutional responsibilities in terms of war-making, and that's a big deal. Second issue that took place over in the House, more than the Senate, but we had an Attorney General of the United States who refused to come to a hearing that the House Judiciary Committee called, and that is dangerous stuff. We have a president who does not understand the Constitution of the United States, does not respect the Constitution of the United States, and is a threat to the very fabric of American democracy. So if I were a member of the House, I would vote to hold Attorney General Barr in contempt. You do not, we have a separation of powers. We don't have an authoritarian government where the president calls all the tunes. And he was asked to testify. He refused to testify. He refused to provide the information that the House wanted, and that is unacceptable. Third thing that I want to say is I realize that here in Iowa, this state in 2016 voted for Donald Trump. And I want to say to the people of Iowa that I can understand why Trump won this state. And I think there is a feeling not only in Iowa but in many parts of the country that people are hurting economically. They're working 2 or 3 jobs. They're worrying about what's going to happen to their kids. And there is a feeling that the Democratic establishment has not been listening to the pain that people are feeling. And Trump came along and he said, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to take on Wall Street, and I'm going to do this. But the sad reality is that while he ran a smart campaign, it turns out that he lied in a very profound way to the people of Iowa and the people of Vermont and the people of America. He lied. All right, and the biggest lie that he told, this is the biggest lie that he told. And you know, it's hard to categorize Trump's biggest lie. I think it was a paper that has now mentioned that he has 10,000 lies. And this guy lies so much. This is unbelievable to me. He can't even tell the truth with regard to where his father was born. Can you imagine that? I mean, I could understand lying about health care or lying about this or lying about the environment, but he can't even tell the truth. His father was born in New York. He claims his father was born in Europe and Germany, I think. But we have a pathological liar as a president. And I would hope for a start, and I know this to be true, that the people of this country, no matter what your point of view is, you're a conservative, you're a progressive, you're a moderate, very few people feel comfortable that we have a president who lies all of the time and really has, what can I say, disparaged the role that a president of the United States is supposed to have in our democracy. And in terms of lying, I want all of you to remember what he said. When he ran for president, Trump said, we will provide health care to everybody. You remember that? Well, you know what? If I'm somebody in Iowa, and I don't have any health insurance, I can't afford health insurance, that's a good reason to vote for Trump. He lied. He led the effort to throw 32 million people off of the health care that they have. All right? Imagine what it means to be dealing with heart disease or cancer or diabetes and lose the health insurance you have. We came within 1 vote of seeing 32 million people lose the health care that they have. When Trump ran for president, he said, remember this, I am a different kind of president. I'm not Paul Ryan. I'm not going to cut Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. Well, in fact, his budget, look at his budget. His budget called for massive cuts to Medicaid, $1.5 trillion. People don't know this. When you have a relative dealing with Alzheimer's who's in a nursing home, who's paying for that bill? Medicaid, by and large, is paying for that bill. $1.5 trillion cut in Medicaid will disrupt families all over this country who will have to make a decision about what's going to happen to their parents or loved ones in a nursing home. He proposed massive cuts to Medicare and cuts to Social Security as well. So when he told you he would not cut Medicaid and Medicare, he lied. Some of you may remember that when Trump was in Iowa, in Vermont, he said, we're going to bring forth a tax plan that is not going to benefit the wealthy. You remember that? Lie. 83% of the benefits went to the top 1% over a 10-year period. And I think what concerns me as much as anything else about Trump is not only his lying, but he is trying to do something that no president in recent history has really tried to do. And whether you're a conservative or a moderate or a progressive, I think every president understands. So when you get to the Oval Office, your job is to bring the American people together as one people. And we have a president who very intentionally, for cheap political gain, is trying to divide us up by the color of our skin, by where we come from, by our sexual orientation, by our religion, by our gender. And that, to me, is really a disgraceful thing for a president of the United States to do, to have us turn on each other because of superficial differences. All right, what is our campaign about? And before I get to that, let me say a word of thanks to all of you and to the people of Iowa. You played in my campaign a very, very significant role in helping to transform the political debate in America and to create a discussion of, in fact, what can be possible. I came to Iowa, and I think it's fair to say very few people knew who the junior senator from Vermont was. We started off in that campaign at about 3-4% in the polls. And the ideas that we were talking about were categorized by the media and the political establishment, you may recall, as being radical and extreme ideas, ideas that the American people would never accept. So when I came to Iowa and I said, you know what, here's a radical idea, you ready for it, Iowa? Somebody works 40 hours a week, that person should not live in poverty. Oh, wow. Nobody believes that. What world are you living in, Bernie? And we said that the minimum wage in this country should not be a starvation wage of $7.25 an hour. It should be a living wage of at least $15 an hour. Well, guess what happened, Iowa, over the last few years? That radical idea has been translated into legislation that has passed in 6 states in America. And you were the first state to say that that is not a radical idea. And by the way, unless I am very mistaken, the U.S. House of Representatives is going to pass that legislation that I introduced in the Senate, others introduced in the House, within the next couple of months, $15 an hour, all right? And when we talked about wages, we also said that maybe we end the absurdity of women making 80 cents on the dollar compared to men. Not a radical idea. And then we had another radical idea and said that if we're going to grow the middle class rather than see it shrink, then maybe we're going to grow the trade union movement in this country, making it easier for workers to join unions, not harder. Okay? And here's another radical idea that we brought forth 4 years ago, which did not appear so radical to the people of Iowa. And that is, we said that the time is long overdue for the United States of America to join every other major country on earth and guarantee health care to all people as a right, not a privilege. And time again, I had editorial after editorial, and those editorials are still coming, attacking me. It's too radical. It can't be done. Somehow, every other country on earth could do it, but I guess we're too dumb. We're incapable of providing health care to all people. But the point is, we took that idea here to Iowa, and the people of Iowa who gave me 50% of the vote, they said, no, that's not a radical idea. That's exactly what should happen. Thank you, Iowa, for doing that. And I want you to know that right now we are gaining more and more support for Medicare for all. We have a very strong program in this country that all of you know, and some of you are on. It's called Medicare. It's a very popular program. It needs improvement. It does not cover dental care, does not cover hearing aids, does not cover eyeglasses. We have to improve that, and our Medicare for All program does just that. But what you are seeing right now, and I'm going to get into this in a minute, this is how the system works. Right now, it will not shock you to learn that the pharmaceutical industry and the insurance companies and other parts of the healthcare industry that are making billions and billions of dollars in profit are paying their CEOs outrageous levels of compensation. The guy who's head of United Health, I think you have some familiarity with United Health here in Iowa. Well, you'd be happy to know that he made $83 million in compensation last year. All right? You'd be happy to know that the guy who's head of Aetna, who put together a merger between Aetna and CVS, which will drive healthcare costs up, you know what he got for his efforts that are essentially coming out of your pockets? He got a $500 million bonus. All right? Some of us have the radical idea that maybe a healthcare system should be about making sure that all people go to a doctor when they should, that people are not bankrupt when they leave a hospital, that we don't have to pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. All right? And when you want to hear about a dysfunctional healthcare system, understand this is how crazy the system is that we are taking on right now. You go to the doctor's office when you are sick, if you can afford to go to a doctor, okay? And the doctor writes out a prescription for you, okay? 1 out of 5 adults in America cannot afford to fill the prescription their doctor writes because the prices of medicine in this country are so high. How insane is that? So what is going on right now is we are being attacked every single day by a coalition of all of the moneyed interest in healthcare. And they're going to tell you the United States can't do what other countries are doing. You can't do this. You can't do that. Terrible things will happen. Bottom line is, in my view, Medicare right now works well for people 65 years of age and older. There is no reason why over a 4-year period we cannot move Medicare to cover every man, woman, and child in this country, and that is what I intend to do. And here's another idea that I came to Iowa talking about, and again, oh, this is undoable, it's too expensive, it can't be done. All of you know we live in a competitive global economy. And all of you know that if we are going to succeed long term, we need the best educated workforce in the world. Well, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, you can get a high school degree, go out and get a good job, and make it into the middle class. Increasingly, that is not the case today. So I proposed an idea which was, opposed by, all of the establishment, the politicians, the media, and that is the time is now to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Now again, think about it. Is this really a radical idea? Does anybody here know how much it costs to go to college in Germany? Anyone know? It costs free. Same thing. I gave a speech in Washington a couple of years ago, and I said, in Finland, college education is free. This guy jumps up, raises his hand. No, you're wrong, Senator. Oh, really? No, they pay us to go to college in Finland. All right. All right. All right. And then we said, and this issue is also beginning to get attention. Think about it for a moment, how insane it is that we got millions of people who did the right thing, tried to get a college education, went to graduate school, and they left school deeply, deeply in debt. Okay? Now, I was in Vermont a number of years ago. We had a meeting on this issue, and a young woman comes up. She says, look, I graduated medical school, working in a community health center. She says, Bernie, I'm $300,000 in debt. I said, oh, I can't believe that. I was in Des Moines later after that. A woman comes up to me after a speech. She says, Bernie, I just graduated dental school. I'm $400,000 in debt, which is not uncommon for people who go to dental school, very expensive. Think for a moment, think outside of the box. How insane is it that we are punishing people for getting an education and having to carry around outrageous levels of debt, in some cases for decades. And in some cases, they're never going to pay it off. How crazy is that? So we're going to do two things. We are going to make public colleges and universities tuition free, and we are going to very significantly lower the level of student debt in this country. All right? And that is an idea that has also caught on in the last few years. You're seeing cities and counties and states moving in that direction. And Iowa was the first state to say, not such a crazy idea. And let me also mention what you all know is that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we have an infrastructure, roads and bridges and wastewater plants. You have some experience with wastewater plants here in Iowa? You have some struggle with clean drinking water here in Iowa? All right. We have a rail system which is falling behind many, many other countries. And I proposed 4 years ago $1 trillion investment in rebuilding our infrastructure, making it easier for communities to pay for the wastewater plants, the clean water that they need, the roads, the bridges, the airports. Now, 4 years ago, the idea of $1 trillion seemed like a whole lot of money. I was told it was much, much too much. Actually, there are people now talking about even more than that. So we made progress on that issue as well. Now, when I talk about Donald Trump, and I want to talk as little as I can about Donald Trump, not a pleasant subject. One of the very dangerous things that Trump does, and not only for our country but for the world, is when he denies the reality of climate change. Okay? So let me be very clear. I believe that climate change is an existential threat to our country and to the entire world. And that's not me talking. You know, I know Donald Trump is, as you probably didn't know this, he is a genius. That's what he tells us. And having studied the issue very thoroughly, he has determined, I don't want to get you all here too nervous, but he has determined that wind turbines cause cancer. Now, he is the first person in the world to have made that discovery, but be that as it may, you have a lot of wind turbines here in Iowa. I just wanted to inform you that the genius president has made that claim. But here is the point, and on a serious vein, a very, very serious vein, and that is that the scientific community has told us that, in a sense, they were wrong about what they projected years ago, that the problem is more serious, more dangerous than they had thought. And as you know, some of the reports that came out months ago says that we have 12 years, which is not a long period of time, to transform our energy system, or else this country and the world will face irreparable damage. Irreparable damage. So to me, when I talk about this as an existential threat, I've got 4 kids and I got 7 grandchildren. All of you have kids and grandchildren, and some little ones are right here. I think, you know, we have a moral responsibility. There are no two ways about it. You cannot turn your back on the possibility of not leaving this planet healthy and habitable for our kids and our grandchildren and future generations. We can't do that. So what we have got to do, Trump notwithstanding, is to take on the fossil fuel industry and transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And I want to thank the people of Iowa. Again, you're playing a leadership role on this. You get about 35% of your electricity now from wind turbines. And that is a step in the right direction. And what we have got to do is invest very heavily into weatherizing our buildings. You have a lot of old buildings in Iowa, as we do in Vermont. I have seen weatherization lower the fuel bills in people's homes by 50%, save people money. It creates jobs and it helps us combat climate change. And the other thing, obviously, that we have to do is invest in sustainable energies like wind and solar. And that is exactly what we do. And you know, I have an idea. Maybe I'm, God, I keep banging into this thing. You know, maybe I am being overly confident. But, you know, we have seen, you know, over the years, over the centuries, incredible amounts of wealth and energy going into wars, countries killing each other and spending huge amounts of money doing that. Maybe, just maybe, with good leadership in this country, we can bring the world together in the crisis that every country on earth faces, and that is climate change. It's not an American problem, it's a Russian problem, it's a Chinese problem, it's an Indian problem, it's a Latin American problem. And what we need is not a president who denies the reality of climate change. We need a president who brings the world together and says, you know what, let's start transforming our energy system to save this entire planet for our kids and our grandchildren. Right now, in the United States, we live in a country, and I want you to think about why that is so. We live in a nation which has more people in jail than any other country on earth, disproportionately African American, Latino, Native American. We need to take on the prison industrial complex. And we need real, underlying real criminal justice reform in this country. What do I mean by that? What we need to be doing, I'll never forget, in southern Vermont, there was a principal in a high school, it was kind of a low-income high school, and she said, Bernie, I love these kids, and I am going to do everything that I can to make sure that none of them drop out of school. And she paid a lot of attention. She hired mentors to be with them. They had a problem at 3 o'clock in the morning with a family issue. There was somebody to call up. We got kids all over this country who are falling through the cracks, okay? They are dropping out of school. They are hanging out on street corners. They don't have the education or the job skills to go out into the world and make a living. And when you're in that situation, bad things happen. So I happen to hold the very radical idea that it makes more sense to invest in our young people in job training and in education rather than more jails and incarceration. And here is an area that we are beginning to make some progress on as well. I know a lot of people get discouraged with the guy we have in the White House. Believe me, I'm in Washington. I know that feeling. But I want you also to understand that 5-6 years ago, there were very few people in this country talking about criminal justice reform. There were Black Lives Matter, the ACLU, a few other groups. But all over the country now, conservatives are talking about criminal justice reform because they understand the insanity of putting $80 billion a year, federal, local, state money, in locking up fellow Americans. So we're making progress on this issue. Very briefly, here are some of the things we've got to do. Number one, we have got to end private prisons and detention centers in this country. Corporations should not be making money and be incentivized to lock up fellow Americans. Second of all, and again, this is an idea that I talked about 4 years ago, not so radical now, we have got to end the very destructive war on drugs. You know why? Over a period of many, many years, millions of people have been arrested for the possession of marijuana. And you know what happens when you get arrested? Occasionally, you get thrown in jail, but most of the time, you get a criminal record. So if you're a low-income kid and you go in and applying for a job and the employer says, well, tell me about yourself. Do you have any criminal record? Well, yes, I do. The likelihood is that kid will not get that job. So we are making progress in that issue all across the country, in Vermont, all over this country, where states are either decriminalizing the possession of marijuana or legalizing it. And that is an important step forward. not only for the American people in general, but to deal with the racism inherent in the war on drugs, in which African Americans and Latinos pay a much heavier price than the white community for possession of drugs. And there are a couple of other issues in terms of criminal justice. And I learn as I go along. I mean, I don't know it all. And I didn't learn this, actually, until a few years ago. Can't believe I didn't know it, but I didn't. Today, there are some 400,000 people. We have about 2 million people in jail. There are 400,000 people in jail who have not been found guilty of any crime. Why are they in jail? Anyone know? That's exactly right. They are in jail. They were arrested, charged with a crime, and they cannot afford the $500 or whatever it is to get out of jail because they're poor people and they can't afford bail. Some of them will eventually be found innocent. Some may not. But think about the regressivity of us today living almost in the time of Charles Dickens. Remember the debtor's prison that Dickens wrote about? That's what you're living in. 400,000 people in jail today because they cannot afford bail to get out of jail. So there's something kind of wrong when you think about criminal justice. You know, what we are supposed to be is a nation of equal justice under the law, right? That's what, which is a very proud and wonderful statement. But we're not that. We are a nation in which poor people end up in jail. But if you are one of the crooks who precipitated the Wall Street crash of 2008 because of your irresponsibility and your illegal behavior, which ended up resulting in millions of people losing their jobs, their homes, their life savings, not one of those crooks ended up with a criminal record. So we need a criminal justice system which treats the rich and the powerful and the poor and the weak equally. And I'll have an attorney general who does that. Now, the message of our campaign, and I think we're going to have bumper stickers on it and so forth, it says, not me, us. Now, I know it's a cute-sounding phrase. It would be a nice bumper sticker. What does it mean? Tell me, what do you think it means? Why is that inherent to this campaign? Why is it something that I believe from the bottom of my heart? We're in it together, yes, but there's something, yes, absolutely, but there's something even more profound than that. Who wants to help me on that one? Any guesses? Yeah. Good. It's not a cult of personality. Yeah. All right. Here's something else, and you don't see this on TV, and you never will. You don't hear. You're not going to read about it too often in the radio. Yeah. Pardon me? No. Here's the point that I want to make on this one. Is look, you can have, and by the way, I mean you can have a president who is, unlike the current president, honest, who is well-intentioned. But the truth of the matter is, given the power structure of America, that one president, no matter how honest and well-intentioned he or she may be in becoming president, cannot do it alone. And let me tell you why. And this is something is almost never discussed. Do you know what the power of Wall Street is? Do you really know what the power is? Do you know that there are 6 financial institutions that have assets equivalent to 54% of the GDP of the United States of America? 6 financial institutions that control trillions and trillions of dollars. That, my friends, is power. Do you know that the 10 largest drug companies in America last year made $69 billion in profits? That the insurance companies make huge profits? That the fossil fuel industry, who lies to us every single day and puts more and more carbon into the atmosphere, denying it all over the world that they're causing irreparable damage, they have unlimited amounts of money. Koch brothers, one example. You all know who the Koch brothers are? All right. Koch brothers, last campaign, put $400 million to elect candidates who represent the wealthy and the powerful. Military-industrial complex, incredible power. You add all of that together, you add the power of the 1%, you understand that these people have unlimited wealth. You have Wall Street. You know what are interest rates on your credit card today? Anyone know? What are you paying? Anybody know? Paying on average about 17%. If you get a product at a store, you go to a store and you charge it, you know what your interest rates are? 26%. Do you know what the banks pay for the money they get from the Fed? 2.5%. That's called usury. All right? Drug companies charging us by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. And here's a promise I have made and repeat to you and to the American people. If elected president, we are going to reduce the price of prescription drugs in this country by half. By half. Is that a radical idea, something that I just thought of? Oh my goodness, 50% would be a good political statement. It is what the rest of the world pays. Why should we pay twice as much as the rest of the world? Because it's the power of the pharmaceutical industry who today can double the price of the medicine you use. And there's no law that can stop them from doing that. And take it on the insurance companies, which have unlimited amounts of money, denying people the claims that they bring forth, et cetera, et cetera. So we have, and then in this state, and in my state, you have the issue of agribusiness. You know what power is about? Power is about companies like Monsanto and others who merge with other large corporations, where their CEOs, where their CEOs make huge compensation packages at the same time as every single day in Vermont and Iowa, we're losing family farmers. We're seeing the growth of factory farms. We're seeing massive consolidation in the industry. So the reason why we talk about us, not me, in this campaign is that if I'm elected president, I can't do it alone. I cannot. I'm honest to you, So I'm not saying to you, vote for me and I'm going to do it all. Can't be done. Wall Street won't allow it. The drug companies won't allow it. Insurance companies, agribusiness, military, industrial complex. The only way we successfully take them on is when millions of people stand up and say enough is enough, that corporate greed will not destroy this country. And what I'm saying is not just a theory that I came up with. Check the history of the United States of America and think about the moments when real profound change came to this country. 150 years ago, workers all over this country had no rights at all. They were forced to work 15, 16 hours a day. If they stood up for their rights, they would be fired. We had children working in factories, children working in the fields. And working class people came together and said, you know what, we are not animals, we are human beings. We deserve dignity, we're going to form a union, and we're going to engage in collective bargaining. And that helped lead to the creation of the American middle class. And think about the civil rights movement. How do you think we made progress in the civil rights movement? It wasn't just Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., one of the great leaders in the history of our country. It was King and others understanding that millions of people, black and white, had to join together in the fight to end racism, the fight to end segregation, the fight to end the insanity of people because of the color of their skin not being able to cast the ballot in Alabama or Mississippi. And millions of people stood up and said, we will no longer tolerate racism in this country, and we have made good progress, although obviously we still have a long way to go. 100 years ago in this country, women did not have the right to vote. Women could not get the education that they wanted, could not do the jobs that they wanted to do. And the change took place not from on top, but when millions of women and their male allies stood together and said, you know what, this is America. Women will not be treated as second-class citizens. And change began to take place. Got a long way to go. And on that issue, and I know I'm in Iowa, let me say this. We still have a long, long way to go for women's rights. And one of the rights that we have got to fight for is to protect and defend Roe versus Wade. And on that issue, I'll tell you what really bothers me. It's not just that I'm, my whole life been pro-choice. What bothers me is we have Republican colleagues. I have Republican colleagues in the Senate, and you've heard them time and time again. They say, we are conservatives. We hate big government. Get government out of the lives of the American people. Is that what they say? Over and over. Except when it comes to a woman controlling her own body. What kind of hypocrisy is that? And 4 years ago, we said, you know what? This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world, but a lot of people don't know that. Because we have massive levels of income and wealth inequality. Now, again, you're not going to see this discussion on television. It does not happen. And it will happen very rarely in the newspapers. But I want you to deal with this for a second. Tell me how you feel about it. In America today, you got 3 families that own more wealth than the bottom half of America, 160 million people. Is that acceptable? No. Okay. Not a word about that in Congress. It will not be talked about in Congress. So you have the top 1% today owning more wealth than the bottom 92%. In Iowa, and I've talked to many Iowans, people working $9, $10, $11 an hour, you should know that 49% of all new income goes to the top 1%. So, let me conclude by saying this. I want to thank Iowa for being the first state to tell the other 49 states that the ideas that we have talked about, the ideas that we talked about in the campaign were not extreme ideas, that were not ideas that the American people did not support. And over that 4-year period, more and more people have come on board those ideas. And in fact, you're going to see a whole lot of Democratic candidates from school board to President of the United States saying very much coming up and supporting the same ideas. That's the progress that we have made. And Iowa went first in that area. And now we are at the point where our job is to complete the revolution that we started 4 years ago. And here I am tonight, this afternoon, to ask for your support in the Democratic caucus. I believe that the American people are profoundly disgusted with a corrupt political system that allows billionaires to buy elections as a result of Citizens United. I think they are disgusted about an economy in which the very, very rich get richer, and a hell of a lot of people in Iowa and Vermont are working 2 or 3 jobs. They are angry and apprehensive about an economy in which, everything being equal, our kids will have a lower standard of living than we do. We can do better than that. And if the people in Iowa stand up, and if people all over this country stand up for economic justice, for social justice, for racial justice, for environmental justice, if people stand up and fight back, there is no limit to what we can accomplish. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we got time for some questions. Anybody have some thoughts or questions? Okay, yeah.
One of the concerns a lot of people have had since the 2016 election has been the Electoral College and gerrymandering.
Yep.
Where do you stand on those issues?
Look, we have a political system which is corrupt. Okay, and that means Citizens United allows billionaires to buy elections, and we've got to overturn Citizens United. What Republicans are, gerrymandering is not a new idea, you know. It's named after a guy named Jerry from, I think, New Jersey, I'm not sure, who actually started, New Jersey, I don't know, who started that problem. But Republicans have taken it to a whole new level. No question about it. Pardon me? Yes, Democrats have been guilty too, yes, absolutely. But Republicans, in fact, have taken it to a higher level. And what you need, I mean, there are different ways to deal with that issue. I think some states are trying to get an independent group of people, Democrats and Republicans together, to come up with some sensible districts rather than, you know, come up with these insane districts which benefit, in this case, the Republican Party. The last thing, you asked about the Electoral College. Look, Donald Trump lost the election by 3 million popular votes, over 3 million votes. It's hard to defend a system in which the guy who was in the White House lost the popular vote by 3 million votes. So I think this is a real issue that's going to have to be looked at. Okay, gentleman right there. Yes, sir. Stand up, please.
New Zealand, when they had many people killed in the mosques, did away with assault weapons.
Yep.
Where do you stand on doing away with assault weapons and limiting the number of weapons available?
Okay. Let me say a word. You're right. New Zealand experiences, all of us know, just a terrible, terrible tragedy where some racist walks into a mosque and shoots down. It was 50 people, I think, were killed. Way back when, you probably don't know this, but people in Vermont know this. In 1988, I was mayor of the city of Burlington, and I ran for Congress. And it was a three-way race. I ran as an independent against a Democrat and a Republican. And I came out in that campaign for the banning of assault weapons. That was back in '88. And that is my view then, and that is my view now. And this is why. I come from a state with a whole lot of hunters, and I support that. I mean, you know, hunters here in Iowa, and people hunt. But an assault weapon is a military weapon designed for one purpose, and that is to kill whole lots of people in a very short period of time, which is what happened in New Zealand. So I voted for the ban on assault weapons then. I will vote for it now. I do not think that that is a weapon that we should be having in civilian populations. Okay. Okay. Gentleman right here. Stand up so everyone can see.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My new shirt.
All right.
This is something that you don't talk about a lot, but there's a guy in Germany by the name of Joschka Fischer whose roots are similar to yours. He started out wearing blue jeans in the Bundestag and became one of the most established diplomats in the world. And the reason I bring him up is that he was particularly effective in negotiating Palestinian and Israeli rights. And I think Trump has lost a lot of street cred with our Palestinian brothers and sisters. Would you be willing to work with the Germans, the foreign ministry, to help gain us back some of that trust?
Look, I have been criticized over and over again. And I said this 4 years ago, and I repeat it to you right now. In terms of the Middle East, we need an even-handed policy. All right? I am a strong supporter of Israel's right to exist in peace and security. Okay? I lived in Israel when I was a young man. But we need a policy which brings the Palestinians and the Israelis together. You got a situation in Gaza right now where the unemployment rate for young people is 60 or 70%. People cannot leave the area. Does anyone think that that is going to result in long-term peace? It is not. So the function of the United States is to play an even-handed role in bringing the Israelis and the Palestinians together. It is difficult. It is complicated. I am no fan of Netanyahu, who is a right-wing leader, and the Palestinians have their problem with leadership. But our job is to do everything we can to try to bring a lasting peace to that very, very troubled region. And as president, that's exactly what I will try to do. Okay. Okay, yeah.
Hi, Bernie.
Hi.
I work in healthcare, and I have a few conservative friends. I noticed that with your platform with Medicare for All, we talk about how it'll be saving us a lot more.
Yeah.
Exactly how much more, and how will we go about the specifics? Because I would love to pitch
Yeah.
that to them.
And the answer is nobody. Healthcare, we spend about over $3 trillion a year, so no one can give you any exact figures. This is what we can start off with. We currently spend about $11,000 per person on healthcare. Got that? Canadians spend about 50% of that, and most countries spend about 50%. A family of 4 in America spends $28,000. Now, the ugly 30-second ads that you will be seeing in Iowa soon, paid for by the insurance industry and the drug industry, will be Bernie Sanders wants to raise your taxes. Terrible guy, wants to raise your taxes in terms of Medicare for all. What they will forget to tell you in their 30-second ad is that Bernie Sanders wants to do away with all of the premiums you're now paying for health care, wants to do away with all of the co-payments and the deductibles that you're now paying, and wants to cut the cost of prescription drugs in half. So here is what the lie is that the Republicans and that the industry will be providing. They're going to say we're going to raise taxes, but they're going to forget to say we're going to raise those taxes in a progressive way. And at the end of the day, while you will pay more in taxes, if you're a family of 4, self-employed right now, you're spending $28,000 a year on health care. You're paying out-of-pocket premiums, co-payments, deductibles. Under Medicare for All, you will be paying significantly less than that. So that is the bottom line, that people will be paying less. And by the way, they're going to have freedom of choice regarding the doctor and the hospital that they go to. Many people today do not have that freedom of choice because you're in a program which has a network of doctors. What happens if your doctor is outside of that network? You got to pay a heck of a lot of money to go to that doctor. All right? So bottom line here is we're spending twice as much as any other country. Our healthcare outcomes in many cases are not as good. This system provides billions in profits for the insurance companies and the drug companies, and they will fight us as hard as they can, and they will lie day after day, and they will spend endless amounts of money trying to defeat Medicare for all. But you know, our day is coming. If the rest of the world can guarantee health care to all of their people for far less money per capita, we can and will do it in the United States. We got a mic?
I appreciate what you said about making college affordable. I'm a mom and I have 2 kids, so I love the idea. Part of the reason I love that idea, though, is because my husband and I fall into that group of people in the world who are saddled with so much student loan debt. The price we pay every month to make it affordable actually increases the end of the debt, or the total cost we'll pay.
Further and further behind.
We are. The balance has gone up, I think, what, $30,000? $40,000 since he graduated from law school, which prevents us from buying a house, having any more children, saving for their college education or our own retirement. I heard you mention that you want to help with the reduction of student loan debt. I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you mean by that and how that will look.
What I mean is that we are going to spend approximately $900 billion a year to substantially, very substantially reduce student debt. Okay, and that means for a start, right now you're stuck with your debt at a certain interest rate, right? You can't refinance. What is your interest rate, do you know? Oh my God. That's insane, all right? All right, so you'll be able to refinance it at the lowest interest rates that you can. And the federal government will put substantial sums of money in to reduce that debt. Okay, so it's not complicated. It's a question of priorities. Trump and his friends decided that it was a priority to give over $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% in private corporations. I think that it is a priority to substantially reduce your student debt, and that's what we will do. Your point, and I thank, what's your name, by the way? All right, Elizabeth made the point. Everyone hear what Elizabeth said? How insane is it? They have to worry about whether they can have more kids, whether you can, get a house, whether you can get a car. I mean, think, for what crime did you commit? That you went to graduate school? All right, all right. All right, this is, when we talk about thinking big, not small, it means to understand that that is insanity in this country. It should not, you should not be penalized for getting an education, and this is a priority for me. Okay, a couple of more questions. Yeah, gentleman way in the back there.
Thank you, Senator, for coming today. Much as you talked about the environmental crisis that we are on a cusp of right now, we are also on the edge of a drinking water, of a fresh water crisis.
Yes.
I'd like to know your ideas about that.
Well, actually, tomorrow we're going to be doing a major event dealing with the crisis facing rural America, and water is part of that. It is, you know, we all remember Flint, Michigan. Remember Flint, Michigan? And that kind of became the canary in the coal mine. And I was there, and I got to tell you, it was a very emotional moment. My wife and I were, without any media, we went to a back room to talk to some of the parents whose kids have been permanently damaged because of lead in the water. Well, it turns out that Flint may be extreme, but it is not alone. I know that in this state, because of the incredible amount of nitrate and use of fertilizer, your water systems have been significantly polluted. All right. All right, you know, we have a water crisis in terms of clean water, in terms of parts of the country that have suffered drought as well. So when I talk about putting very substantial amounts of money into infrastructure, the right of people to enjoy clean water, this is going to be an expensive project, all right? From bottom on up, you got, I mean, it's not just aquifers. You got cities where pipes are 100 years old, they're leaking enormous amounts of water. Wastewater, I was mayor of Burlington, we established, we spent more money on environmental protection than any project in the history of Vermont for a wastewater plant. It was enormously expensive. It's more expensive now. So it costs a lot of money to do this. But at the end of the day, in America, I don't think it's a radical idea to say that when people turn on the faucet, they should be able to drink clean water, right? Okay, and I know that that is an issue right here. All right, last point, ma'am, right here. Last question.
I've read some articles about the military being really, really worried about climate change.
Yes.
So could you espouse on that?
Well, I mean, the military has people who live in the real world. And one of the concerns that the Department of Defense and the CIA and our intelligence people, intelligence agencies have, is what climate change will do around the world. When you have drought and when you have flooding, it's going to make it more and more difficult for people to grow the crops that they need to survive and to get the water they need. And when that happens, people are going to migrate. If you look at what happened in Syria, a lot of people from the rural area migrated into the big cities. So they are worried about the national security implications of millions and millions of people migrating into other people's countries and land and what that means. So you have, you know, the military, they have to be rational in their thinking, unlike the President of the United States. So in fact, if you talk to these guys, many of them are moving into sustainable energies. If you go to Nevada, you find a major military base there gets about 25% of its electricity from solar. So they understand the reality of all of these things. All right, let me conclude. We're off to Fort Dodge in a little while. I want to thank you all for coming out. The goal of this campaign is obviously to win the Democratic primary. And if we win the Democratic primary, obviously we're going to do everything that we can, and I think successfully, to defeat Donald Trump. I just want to, and I want to mention to you, you're going to hear a lot of attacks on me. You know, that's the way it is. And one of the arguments is Sanders can't beat Trump. Well, check out 3 polls that our campaign did. We did it objectively and honestly. In Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. We beat Trump by 9, 10, and 11 points in each of those states. In fact, And a CNN poll just came out the other day that has 6 points out of them. But I think we can defeat Trump because, A, we're going to get more and more people involved in the campaign, including a lot of young people and working people who often don't vote. So our goal is to win the Democratic primary. Our goal is to defeat Trump. But our goal is something else on top of all that. I would not be running for President of the United States if it was just about winning the election. That's important. I'm running for President of the United States because it is absolutely imperative that we create an economy and a government that works for all of us, not just the 1%. And at the end of the day, as we go forward, please remember that the 1%, no matter how much wealth and power they have, which is a lot, they are 1%. We are the 99%. And last I heard, 99% is a lot bigger number than 1%. Thank you all very much. Okay, let me head out here.